Lights, camera, innovation. Walt Disney Studios chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform the movie-making process. Together, we kept a remote production hub in Hawaii and sync with a team in California to bring Lilo and Stitch to theaters this summer. This is picture-perfect collaboration. This is Walt Disney Studios with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello everyone, you all know what I'm going to say. As I say every year, so now the end is near, and so we face the final game week. As I say every year, oh, what a terrible cliche. Any pod that says that should be cancelled or at least put on break for a little while. Fear not, that will happen soon. But it's true, here we are, ready to go into the final Sunday goal rush with perhaps a different hue this year, with salvation looking likely very far from possible for both of us. And yeah, I mean, the good thing is we'll be together for that one at the first bear in Waterloo, as we'll get again highlight very shortly. But yeah, here to look forward to either this week coming or the season ending, or indeed both, is Sam, fresh from a trip overseas as well. A molto bene, trip to Italia. All right, mate. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Very refreshed. Went over to Florence, enjoyed Fiorentina, their final home game of the season, 3-2 win against Bologna, the newly crowned cup victors Bologna as well. So they were in party mood. It was a great game and a great city as well. It was great to be out there, but I was a little bit concerned today that I'd be doing this pod from an airport because our flight was several hours delayed. So thankfully I'm back in time and I've got my regular setup, and hopefully I'm coming across loud and clear, ready for what is the final game week. And it's been a long season for both of us, hasn't it, Tom? But yeah, we're looking forward to it. We've got a meetup in person later on this week for the final game week together. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. And as always, for the final time this season, whilst we're during the season, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, as Tom mentioned, it is the final game week, so we'll be looking ahead to that. The whole thing will be devoted to game week 38 and the preview that we normally chuck into the second half of the pod, but a slightly different lineup today, as we'll be focusing on best transfers integrated into the main topic rather than a knee-jerk. Instead, debate the chaos versus control elements of the final games and trying to determine which ones will be more chaotic, which ones will be more controlled games, and trying to find that spike in variance that we always like looking for in the final game week. I think we all kind of know game week 38 to be that high scoring game week, but it's more situation dependent than that. So we're going to take a dive into that. And of course, Tom has, as always, prepared some excellent data. We'll be having a look at the final day data from all of the last, I think it's 5 seasons, Tom. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, 5 this time.
Perfect. And a little trip down memory lane across those, which we will probably enjoy. I think there's a few final day hauls that we've both enjoyed over the years. So hopefully you guys out there can relate to that as well. But finishing off, of course, with the final best captains of the season. Lots of options to plow through there and where we stand with our final moves. It is the 20th of May. It's half time during the Palace Wolves and the City Bournemouth games. Lots of players in play for both of us. And of course, it would be wrong of us not to give a little shout out to FPL Meets, wouldn't it, Tom?
Yes, indeed, we will. As mentioned last week, just be there on Sunday from 2:30 p.m. I'll be there actually, probably about half an hour to 45 minutes before, alongside a friend of the pod, James FPL, and maybe you, Sam, depending when you rock up. Cool.
Yeah.
Spoke about it last week, but it's the first at the Thirsty Bear near Waterloo Station, London. Always fun, always a great event. I think it will be quite a well attended one this year, for all we know. Lots of responses on X and Blue Sky and all across socials about it. Lots of people intend to come along for that final day goal rush. And if you need an incentive to come along, even more, 20% off all food and drink if you're with the FPL Meets Mob, which is always good. But yeah, hopefully you can make it, and hopefully we'll see you there. Definitely got anything more to add. We spoke about it last week, didn't we? Should we move on to scores on the doors? Obviously, as you mentioned, Sam, the second half is still to come. But yeah, you've had another good week, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been quite pleasant so far. I wasn't really that focused on the FPL, I'm not going to lie, because obviously I was out having a good time in Italy, and it's been a tough season as well. So I wasn't too focused. I did my transfer. I kind of put it to one side, and every now and then I check the scores. And I hadn't really noticed quite how well it was going in the first little instances of the game week. A lot of returners. Watkins only got the assist, but captain, so 10 points for him. Whistler and Burmo both returned. Obviously, and Burmo's could have been a lot more, but he was a rank threat against me at just over 100%. So I was hoping for minimal there. So the missed penalty obviously kind of weirdly helped me very slightly. Salah blanked again, over 100% ownership at my rank. Bowen scored on a great run of form. I'm sure we'll talk about him at times on this pod. Milenkovic getting a goal, and it looked like he would be on a mega haul with the clean sheet intact until Bowen obviously cancelled it out. And Raya as well, with 5 saves in the opening, what was it, 25 minutes? And then
lots of double saves as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the highlights, because obviously you were away having fun, but yeah, lots of really cool double saves as well from Raya, which seems to be a specialty, doesn't it?
Perfect. More of that in game week 38, please. That would be fine. And yeah, I've got 3 players playing at the moment: Gvardiol, Munoz, and Ismail Assar, who's got the assist in the first half. So yeah, we're off to a good start to the games this evening. I've not got Kevin De Bruyne. You do. 58 points for me. Murphy coming off the bench for Isaac, up to 275k. Not going anywhere, but it's nice to get a green arrow. And if I can get just inside 250, then that'll be a mini success in a sea of rubbish this season. Can't remember if I can swear on this pod or not, but we'll go with the word rubbish for now.
You can do whatever you want, mate. It's your pod too. Right. And as for me, pretty much I've got the same team as you, except I've got De Bruyne, whereas you've got Assar. So De Bruyne missing from 4 yards out versus Sarr getting the assist for the second and Nketiah goal. That's the key difference. Let's see what happens at the end of today's pod and the end of today's games. See where I am, whether I do have a smidgen of hope for a mad final day or not. I'm going to present the pod as if I do, just in case. Okay. But I mean, it is very much kind of, it's pie in the sky for me, but I know there's loads of people who are right on the cusp of where they want to be. And that's kind of the position we're going to be taking for a lot of this. And if you're consolidating as well, we'll definitely kind of cover that too in today's main topic. So there's lots of different ways we could look at the final day. We could kind of go into a data breakdown, look at the teams over the last few weeks and look at key players and things like that. And we're sort of going to do that. But the thing is, a final day is always a crapshoot. And I'll talk about the data that we see on the final day, and long-term listeners to the show pod will know exactly what I always say about this, which is evidence and data based. But this time around, I think what would be really interesting is to look at chaos versus control for this week. So I think the whole point of this really is that chaos, there's 6 of the games I think have nothing to play for outside of league positions, and as we spoke about 3 or 4 weeks ago, neither of us are really convinced that that's enough to motivate players to perform. And the financial incentives, sure, great, but at the end of the day, these are guys who are earning an awful lot, really. So I think that their club earning £2.8 million more for an extra space isn't going to do too much. So those games are kind of difficult to read. There's hard to read the tea leaves on, and they are broadly kind of characterized as chaotic. On the other hand, you've got 4 games which are control, because there are teams within them that have something to play for. The only tangible thing left to play for within the scope of this season's finale is, well, we'll see what happens to City today, but I think it is that 3rd to 7th, how that all drops out. I think if Chelsea do finish 6th or 7th, I think it is, then 8th does come into play, as long as Chelsea win the UEFA Conference League. That's always the one. I always get those two confused. So they're kind of marginally, some of these things might actually be less chaotic than we think. But still, I think broadly at the moment, we're basing this on what we know now. So Man United, Villa, obviously because Villa had something to play for. Forest, Chelsea is the biggie for the final day. That's the race to Champions League or whatever. Newcastle, Everton, and Fulham, Man City are the 4 games that we've characterized as the games that are to do with control. And I suppose kind of the main reason we've done this is just so we can think about what you lean into on the final day when you're making those final calls. Are you leaning into the controlled element? Are you leaning into games where you can try to read in some sort of, okay, there's motivation here, therefore it's more predictable, more controllable, that a player I'm buying is likely to be incentivized, motivated, and is likely to do well? Or do you lean into the chaos and just think, okay, you know what, I'm going to have a dog in this fight and just hope it goes off? So, Ipswich versus West Ham, buy your own, or indeed captain Jared Bowen. Assume that might be a 3-3 mad final day, Liverpool, Southampton 4-4, that kind of thing, and just hope that he's involved as the talisman. I think that's always a really interesting way of looking at the final day. And I suppose, Sam, just to start, I mean, what games appeals to you most, and which one of the two, I guess, appeals to you most, thinking about specifically the final day context?
Yeah, so it's interesting when you say chaos and control, because I think your mind would naturally go towards chaos for goals, but control can also breed goals. It doesn't necessarily have to be just chaos that can find us those big hauls. You can look at 2 or maybe even 3 of those control games, and arguably there's enough riding on it for one of the teams. Let's take Man United Villa for instance. Man United, one way or another, are either going to be in party mode because they've won, or they're not going to give a monkeys about that game anyway, because they're not going to have any dog in that fight. They don't care whether they come 15th, 16th, 17th, and it's all on tomorrow night, really, against Spurs. So Villa, obviously still in the Champions League race, are going to be throwing everything they can at it. So it's down as a control game because a team or one team at least has a lot to play for in it. But that could be a controlled demolition job. It doesn't have to be a 0-0, 1-0. Games have been played all season long where both teams have had something to play for, and we've still seen goals at times. So whilst chaos is probably where I will naturally lean for most of the hauls, I think that's fair. It doesn't mean that just because you've got players in the control games, especially for specific teams, that they can't also haul. Like Watkins away at Man United, Rodgers as well in that game as well, could also be fantastic options to have this week. So I wouldn't just move away from them because we're eyeing them up as control games, if that makes sense. That being said, on the chaos side of it, that Spurs-Brighton game, that's got goals written all over it, you would think. That could be your 3-3, 4-4, like something mad. Spurs, very similar to Man United, the logic that I've just applied there. They've been leaky all season long, conceded 60-plus goals, I think, in the league. So even at the best of times, they are due a 3 or 4 goal mauling at times, and they can score themselves as well. Brighton can be pretty good defensively, but also leaky at times, and score a fair few goals themselves. So I like that game if you can catch a haul there. Bournemouth for obvious reasons, Arsenal for obvious reasons as well, because it's so heavily weighted one way or the other. I think Arsenal specifically will come onto it, but it's finding that player that is going to get the minutes and therefore could get the haul. That's the difficulty. With Bournemouth, they've just been a bit rubbish recently. They've just not been that convincing. And there's 2 or 3 players there that obviously you can spike a haul out of, but they don't really have an out-and-out talisman. And the goal share is quite spread. It's more leaning toward Everton Nilsson recently, but it is quite spread. So Yeah, I think the one that I'd be most confident on is Spurs Brighton for like a big goal fest. I also like Liverpool at home to Palace as well. I think that could be 3 or 4.
Yeah, I also really like Ipswich West Ham. I just feel like that one's just so uncallable if we're going in, if we're leaning
Yeah.
into the we just don't know what that score is going to be. And within that, and James in the chat has just said it as well. Maybe you do start to, and I think you started to mention it as well, homing on the talisman in some way, shape, or form. I've just seen that Clivert's gone off at half time for Bournemouth as well. So
Yeah.
there are going to be some people who did have a look at that, and I think that might put paid to that line of thought. But you're right. I think that within these sorts of contexts, I do quite like the idea of just kind of going for it and seeing what happens within those games, because those are the games likeliest, I think, to go off. The control games, okay, Man United Villa, I think, is probably a good one to mention. But I think that if you did kind of, if you were going for Watkins or Rodgers, you probably would have gone there already, is my thought.
True.
If not, I think that they probably would be kind of quite high on my list. Forest, Chelsea, I'm not sure you're investing in either of those teams new. Newcastle, Everton, I do think there's maybe something with Anthony Gordon, former club, final day, etc., etc. I think a lot of the eyes on that will be about Isaac's availability and what happens there. And Fulham, Man City, I think probably is one of those that you just, you either keep what you've got, maybe sell Kevin De Bruyne. So I suspect that Guardiola is kind of going to be the main dog in the fight for most people there, which does leave kind of, as you mentioned, Southampton, Arsenal, Bournemouth, Leicester, maybe not Wolves, Brentford, maybe Brentford, Spurs, Brighton. Don't know if anyone's going to be buying anyone from Liverpool, Crystal Palace, and Ipswich, West Ham as the games that people are probably going to be looking at the most, just to kind of show how the market is kind of looking at this at the moment. Obviously, quite early days, game weeks are in flight. Bowen is the most bought in player, actually. 75 grand have brought him in. A lot of people are swapping Isaac out, and the beneficiaries of that are Watkins and Evan Nilsson. I
Makes
don't know.
sense.
Talk about selling his out later. But 40,000 have sold Marmoush before his goal tonight. So, yeah, a lot of people are buying Visser as well, I've just seen. And Saka has been brought in. So, broadly, Watkins being bought, that's kind of the main kind of, there's a point to that, I suppose, because it is at sale. But the majority of people seem to be just following the points, as it were, at the moment. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason behind it. And I suppose, I don't know, it's more about kind of where the movement is actually happening in terms of players being sold. I think that, and where the spaces are in our teams, I think that that's kind of going to be more what informs what people do. So to take Southampton Arsenal, a chaos game, and obviously that's a big sort of carrot to a lot of people. People think, well, okay, Saka, talisman, crazy game, that could easily be 4 or 5-0, or you could alternatively take the narrative that pick your own adventure. Surely, Arteta's gone this whole way through the season. The team has literally been on the beach since last week. Maybe this, I don't know whether he's actually going to take the handbrake off here. But yeah, a lot of people are looking at Saka this week, Sam. And I suppose if you are a KDB owner like me, and you can get there in one move, or you've got 2 free transfers and you can get there in 2 moves, that does feel a little bit academic, doesn't it, to make that transfer, albeit if City do for some reason lose today, maybe the Fulham game does become even more impactful. So maybe KDB does stay. But that seems to be the way you get to Saka, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And for quite a while, I was jealous of the route to get to Saka and almost switch Salah back to Palmer last week, so I had an easier route to get to Saka for this week. But the closer we're getting, I think if I had an easy route there, I would still do it. I think there's still a pretty good chance that he starts, gets good minutes, and obviously as soon as those 2 things are there, that is a great fixture, and he could easily haul against Southampton. That right-hand side all season has been Southampton's weak point or weakest point. There are a lot of weak points. But Saka, is there, like, in the back of my mind now, I'm just ever so slightly doubtful as to whether he's a lock to start or get good enough minutes. Because Nwaneri's there, he's had a good season as well. Is there any reason why he couldn't get some minutes in game week 38 against Southampton? Like, if Saka wants to get off to the beach early or get back into the physio room to start the next season fresh, then you could just leave him for that one. I think if I was making the call right now, I'm like 95% sure he starts, but there's just that little doubt in the back of my mind, and that might be enough to put me off. I don't know. I think if I was in the position, I'd still be eyeing up or penciling in that move and hoping we got a call early before the deadline that he is going to start, because but bringing in a player that you're not completely confident on might be a little bit risky, especially if he's going to be a captain.
I think he does start, to be honest. I wouldn't have too many concerns about that. I don't mind either
Okay.
him or Martinelli. I do like kind of him versus Leif Davis on last day. I mean that's quite a good prospect, isn't it? Really, not Leif Davis. Who's your left back?
It
Who's your left-
changes.
Yeah. So who's your left back? I don't know why I was thinking. I was thinking that for Bowen. Yeah. I think it's just, and you've got Harwood Bellis and Bednarak, two titans that made you into AC Milan v 2.0 missing. So having some
Walker
coverage.
Peters as well, probably out. We think.
What are you going to be doing? Fielding a team of just a pack of biscuits?
I'm not going to Meets this weekend, by the way. I'm actually starting left back. So
it's a crash test dummy is being fielded and sent back to Southampton. Probably do better actually stats than a lot of your defenders this year. But I mean some element of that is actually quite interesting. I know that Kieran said in the chat as well about Kai Havertz. The only thing that may kind of perturb me on that is Marino's back from his suspension, so maybe he starts and Havertz comes off the bench. I don't know.
Yeah.
That'd be the only thing that would worry me slightly. I do like it as a punt, though. Believe me, I think the whole thing outside of Saka really is a bit of a punt. Like, I've had my issues in the past. Of Martinelli does have 490s in the 390s in the last 4. But what's the bet that he comes off for Trossard in the 60th minute? Hasn't done anything. It feels like Saka's kind of the flight to safety, and I wouldn't be surprised if Saka does become kind of the main captaincy nomination for a lot of people this week as well. We'll talk about that in a bit. At the back, Saliba, obviously, I don't know whether he's going to be risked. I kind of doubt it, to be honest. And who knows what team's going to line up for Arsenal, but I very much doubt there's any point in Saliba playing that game, to be honest. And I also don't think you should bother to replace him. I've seen a few teams where you're playing Dunk or something off the bench, or Ait Nori or whatever. I mean, I just let that happen, to be honest, and focus your transfers going forward. I don't really see the point in doing that, right, Sam?
Yeah, the upside's limited. I think the only exception I could possibly get on board with is someone like a Kirkez, potentially, because the clean sheet odds are good. And if you can bag an attack and return and you get a bit lucky there, then you could be looking at a 12 to 15 pointer if you get very, very fortunate. So there's a little bit more upside for someone like him, I think. But even with all of that said, if you've got, like, for example, my team, I've got Munoz on the bench or Milenkovic. Neither good fixtures, but neither are so bad that I would say it's worth a hit to get rid of them, to bring in and start Kirkez if Saliba wasn't to be risked, which, by the way, I don't think he will. I don't think he'll play, but I'm probably just going to start him anyway and hope. But if either of them come off the bench, they've both got good enough attacking threat, and weirder things have happened than the clean sheet. Liverpool are on the beach. I think that's fair to say. And then you've also got a pretty historically tight Nottingham Forest side and what should be a pretty cagey game against Chelsea, you'd imagine, at home. So is it worth a hit to get rid of either of them, or using the transfer on a defender when you could be chasing higher upside elsewhere? Probably not. So yeah, it's not something I'm completely ruling out. And if you've got a couple of free transfers, then maybe you could sort it if it's for a Kirkez. But outside of that, probably not for me either.
Yeah, and you always get wild stuff like Dallo's 15 points last year or something like that. I mean, if you've got a Munoz, for example, and you're like, oh crap, I'm not sure whether I want to field him if I've got Saliba injured. I'd just play Munoz, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, the positions he gets in. I mean, is it that out of hand that, that game becomes a 3-2, but Munoz gets a goal? I mean, that's all you really need in that sort of game, isn't it? Bournemouth players for that Leicester game, obviously quite a appealing game. That one, again, a 1 on the FDR. Is that to Evanilson? I think is something which is going to come to a lot of people's minds. Obviously, it's in my mind as well. My only sort of the only sort of downside about that, we talked about Evanilson a couple of times, so I don't think we need to make the case for him. The only thing I really want to kind of mention is kind of the leaks there really on the final day. So, I mean, selling Isaac, last year he was a doubt on the final day. And guess I sold him for Mateta, who luckily got 20 points. But lots of people benched him and all this sort of thing. And against Brentford, he came and scored a goal and assist. And I think this, it's a must-win game, the Everton game. Only the 3 points realistically. And Newcastle leakers and all this sort of thing are literally the worst of the lot of them. And there'll be so many leaks on the final day. I guess keep your wits about you is all I can say, and try to verify sources. But it's so hard, isn't it, Sam, at that last minute when you're kind of hovering over your transfers, and just one small thing from somebody that pops up on the notification preview, like that can be enough to make you think, okay, right, I'm going for it. And then later on, it could turn out that it was Will NUFC or some other chancer like that kind of just giving the duff info. So yeah, just try to be as careful as you possibly can with that info on the last day. And I think it's especially true with Isaac, because I mean, if he's fit, I don't really want to get rid of him. And I think he's my only route to Evan Nilsson with Watkins and Visser as my other two strikers. That's the only way I could ever get to him. If you've got an easy way to get there, so Ponson and Vardy this week, for example, that's cool. And that's more than fine. But yeah, if you are selling Isaac this week for home game versus Everton, who I think are very much going to be in jobs done sort of territory, and that's one I'd really be kind of keeping an eye on.
Yeah, so I think ahead of game week 38, ahead of Sunday, try, if you're on Twitter, make sure your block and mute list is tight, and you know that the sources that you're going to get on your feed half an hour before the deadline are fairly reliable. Newcastle, there's not many out there that I would rely on. In fact, I'd probably say there's zero at the moment. I'd only listen to the leaks that have been reposted by the reputable accounts out there. And even then, tread very carefully with someone like Isak, because Eddie Howe is historically pretty tight-lipped and often throws in a curveball. I think it's plausible to say he does it on purpose to the leakers and to try and throw people off the scent at times as well. So be very, very careful with that. I think Isak's not the only player that you might get rid of to get in Evan Nilsson. You could look at Cunha out if you've brought him in. Obviously, benched today. Minutes will be shaking game week 38. Of course, he looks like he's off in the summer to Man United. Mateta, probably you could look at obviously selling him. No problems there. The players I wouldn't sell at time of recording anyway, unless we hear something very negative about Isak. I wouldn't sell Isak. I wouldn't be selling a Wisser, for example. I don't think that upside, or Watkins, in either cases, that upside is good enough to be switching across. Possibly not even Marmoush either at this point in time. I'd probably just leave them because they've got decent upside. And if you think they start, all three of which you'd think they do, Evan Nilsson's a good player, but he's not on penalties. And there are good Bournemouth midfielders out there that you can also look at potentially. So it can work, and I might change my mind. I might be given some data that convinces me otherwise, but I don't think he's that essential that you need to be removing someone like Isak unless he is definitely out.
No, definitely not. I mean, you got Evan Nilsson, maybe from that sort of news today that João Pedro and Van Hecker had a bit of a bust up in training, which means he's been dropped out. So I think you're looking at Welbeck if you want to go for a Brighton player.
Okay.
I mean, they're kind of both in the same category, aren't they? Really, of kind of just a bit of a fun game, I suppose. There, and if we do think, okay, there is a chance that Chelsea do, there's something kind of vaguely for them to play for. I do think I'm right to put them in the chaos category because it is probably rather far-fetched as it is. In terms of other sales, though, Sam, I mean, if you are a KDB owner, I do think there probably is scope to move him on. We kind of mentioned the upside of buying Saka. Having watched him fairly closely over the last few weeks, he's been in my team. It's probably justified to be moving De Bruyne on now, I think. I mean, I'm hoping, obviously, he now goes off and scores a couple of goals and makes me look silly for saying that. Because, again, he's recorded an XG of above 1 in one game due to one very, very close range miss. But I do kind of think that maybe the upside will be there in kind of moving on for a Saka or maybe another punt around the block. So maybe a player, I don't know, like Martinelli, as I mentioned, maybe a player like Bowen. There are quite a few who are potentially in the mix to be brought in for the final day. I'm not sure I want Clivert now, but maybe a Matoma if you want to get extra spicy. Your man Semenyo, Sam, or if you're being really, really bloody boring, there's also Morgan Rogers, who's always there for you.
Yeah, I think KDB is a player that you could feasibly hold on to. Like, I don't think you need to sell him, but considering some of the midfield options out there that you can get across to pretty easily, I think he will be a make weight for a lot of people. There's a decent enough reason to be getting rid of him. He has played a lot of minutes recently. If the game goes the way we think it is doing so far today and finishes with a Man City win, then they're in a strong position for the Champions League. I don't think they're completely locked in for it. I'll just do a double check, but
No, they're not.
they're,
It's
they're
68
still,
points to be on. So I
yeah,
think if they lose, if they lose and everyone else, but obviously Chelsea and Forest can't both win.
exactly. That's what I'm trying to work out mentally right now.
Yeah, I think they could, because if Villa, Chelsea, and Newcastle will win and they don't, then they could not
Right.
be in the Champions League. I think.
Yeah,
It's
it was
very
the
quick
Chelsea.
benchmarks.
Yeah, it was the Forest Chelsea thing that was throwing me there. But yeah, okay, so that they still have something to play for. They will field their strongest 11 in that case, you would think. KDB has been in that strongest 11. Rodri's back on the bench today as well. So that might mean minutes for Rodri. KDB plays a little bit more advanced, not having to sit in that sort of more withdrawn role that we saw him in the FA Cup final, for instance. That was partly because of Kovacic as well, I believe. I don't think he's a must sell, but given the options out there, like Saka, and you seem very confident he starts, I'm still 95%. I think he probably comes off early and Nwaneri gets some minutes, but that's still plenty of upside. I don't mind it. I think if you've got any other things to do, like any other issues, then you could probably just look at holding KDB. I don't think he's a must sell, but if you've got a clean slate of health and no worries whatsoever, then KDB out to Saka or one of those other alternatives you mentioned. Bowen, if you don't have him, is probably the best other option. But
Yeah,
Bournemouth, Arsenal, fine.
Yeah, I do think overall my feeling is that it's probably best to be leaning into those chaos games a little bit and just seeing what happens. I think they're the ones where you've got, not that FDR's kind of the North Star to follow all the time, but they're the ones where you've got kind of the quote unquote easy games on paper. So maybe Villa United would be one that you think could be one to exploit, but I suspect we're all kind of already locked in on where those assets are. And it does sort of feel to me a lot of the time to make it look best for you. A lot of the moves, especially when you think about who you're selling, do kind of see you home in on those particular games and just kind of hope that you spike variance in that one game, which goes absolutely bloody wild, because there is always one which does do that. I don't know, Sam. I do kind of feel like hold those transfers to the very last moment if you possibly can, just because we've spoken about Saka a little bit. You got a few doubts. I think that's fine to have as well. Like, who knows what team honestly could be fielded that day? We've seen that in the past, haven't we? Where I remember one year Liverpool went to Newcastle on the final day, and then Salah and Trent didn't play, and there was no reason for that, but they just didn't. I saw that Slot came out and said that McAllister won't play another game in the season. Like, who knows what other players have kind of just put the manager's just gone, right, okay, have a bit of a break now. Maybe there'll be some internationals if you're not in Club World Cup. Have a little break now, Bukayo. I'll see you. I'll see you in June. And that could be what's happening to some extent. We might not know. So yeah, sadly, I think we are in the hands of the leakers a little bit, beholden to the press conferences too. Just kind of see how it all, I suppose, shakes out later on. But yeah, I guess broadly, Sam, it is all about chaos, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think chaos is where I would tend to lean my transfers towards. I would reiterate my point earlier. I don't think you have to get rid of some of your players in the control games, especially if they're in the more the side with something to fight for. Your Villas, your Man Cities. I don't think you need to get rid of them, especially if the opponent, Man United, Fulham, for instance, don't have anything to play for. That's fine, but if you've got no other issues, then even those players could potentially be on the chopping block. I think lean towards the chaos if possible.
Yeah, let's see what's happening in the Palace Wolves game at the moment. It's 3-2 because neither team
Mm.
really gives a toss. But it's not as if they down tools and do nothing. It just means that it's a lot looser, so more goals are scored, and that
Yeah.
nicely brings us on to the final day and what that looks like for basically throughout time, but over the last 5 seasons at least. So if you're watching on YouTube, on screens, last 5 seasons final data. Sorry, I love a portmanteau. With the total season goals, so the total number of goals scored in the season, average goals for game week 1 to 37, game week 38, the average goals scored, game week 38 clean sheets, top scorers per year, their score, and the tally of players scoring 10 plus in the final week. Lots to take in, so I just provided an average too, which is what I'll mostly be working off of when we speak about this. But in short, as I say every year at this point, on the final day, expect a buttload of goals. On average, you'll see about 1,092 goals per season. I'll just mention that last year was a major outlier, by the way, with 1,246 goals scored, averaging over 3 goals per game, whereas normally you've got just over 2.5. For the record, this season it's also going to be a high scorer. Not quite last year, but as of game week 36, we're averaging almost 3 goals a game at 2.94, I think it was. But yeah, on a normal game week, i.e., game weeks 1 to 37 every year, we expect about 29 goals to be scored, so 28.6 per week. On final days, you're kind of averaging out about 34.4. So an uptick of about 6 goals netted on the last day. You'd expect fewer clean sheets as a result. I'm not added that to the chart, but normally you get about 4 with a normal average of about 5. So yeah, empirically, expect goals. Just to run you through players over the last 5 years and the top scorers on the day. Quite a few names here in terms of the top 3 scorers per day. Some nice memories as well. So in 2019, 2020, Kevin De Bruyne himself, when he could score a goal, bashed in 19 points, Sam, 2 goals and assists. The City thrashed Norwich 5-0. Every single one of the last 5 seasons has seen a 5-0 happen on the final day, with Aubameyang scoring the same, penalised by being a forward. He got 16 versus KDB's 19. And Mason Mount, remember him, was third that year with 1 goal and 1 assist for Chelsea. 2021, Pablo Fornals, yes, remember him, of Betis fame, could win the Conference League with Betis this week or next week. And he scored 2 goals and just another as West Ham beat, Southampton 3-0 to secure European football, scoring 19 points in the process. Nicola Pepe and Sadio Mane both scored 16 points, scoring braces, and Bruno got 2 assists for United that year. Another 5-0 was the highest scoring game then. As I mentioned, Everton lost 5-0 to City. Kun Aguero scored a final brace off the bench that day. I captained him for that as well. 2022, Kulusevski, top scorer of a brace as Spurs beat Norwich. Again, 5-0. Carrion Road, 16 points for the Swede. A second highest scorers were Gundogan. Brace City clinched the title with a 3-2 nail biter versus Villa. And Southampton legend Cedric got a goal and assist for Arsenal in the 5-1 demolition of Everton at the Emirates. And the likes of Gross, Maddison, Jose Perez, etc. scored 13 points, I think it was. 2023, Kane on this final game, as you remember, Sam, 16 points, 2 goals and 1 assist. Pinnock and Xhaka were the second high score was 15. Xhaka braced in his final Arsenal appearance, another 5-0. That's a victory over Wolves. And Southampton again, the conversation here, Sam. Sulemana, the legend who's still there, and he was the third highest scorer that week with a brace in that memorable 4-4 draw of Liverpool we mentioned the final day. And finally, last year, Mateta with a hat-trick and assist in the 5-0 demolition of Villa. He broke the 20-point mark, first time that's happened for a long time. His mate Eze, 2 goals and assists as well, and third Bruno Guimaraes with 1 goal, 2 assists. So yeah, over the years, the average of all of this is that the top scorer tends to score about 18 points, and there are probably actually between 14 and 15 players who will score over 10. Last year, there were 18 players did it. So there is, within the scope of the FPL sort of universe of being about sort of 50, 60 players, quite a decent percentage chance if you do get the role right and that you'll be all right. But yeah, a real look back there with a mixture of names, both household and random, cropping up on the top scorers in the podium. But the takeaway is, Sam, expect goals. Don't bother with defensive transfers unless you have the perfect front 7, barring leaks, and hope you get it right in terms of players you buy or field over others.
Yeah, perfectly summarized. Good data crunching as always there, Tom. And yeah, it's always interesting to kind of challenge the commonly held notion that there are just more goals in game week 38. I think it's just one of those sort of lazy things that's chucked out there quite often, when actually it is true. It does hold up. There's a good six-ish odd goals more than you would normally expect in the final game week. So there's a significant uptick, about half a goal extra per game. So half goal extra. Wait, am I getting that wrong? Yeah, half a goal extra per game than normal-ish. And a few more hauls than you'd normally expect as well. So yeah, like you said, defensive transfers, unless it's a defender with significant goal threat, I'd probably just leave it be. Again, this is anecdotal. I haven't done any data crunching on this, but like the clean sheets that I remember having picked up in game week 38 are always the ones I don't expect whatsoever. The chaos thing is very good for goals, but also there are some teams out there that will just randomly solidify or get the clean sheet where you never expect one. So I think, yeah, if you're struggling with a defender transfer this week, you probably just leave it unless you're in really desperate need. Outside of that, yeah, look for players who have high shot volume, high goal threat in terms of like in and around the box constantly, and teams with something to play for against teams with nothing to play for, always good. But like we've already reiterated, the ones where both teams are kind of in party mode or on the beach for whatever reason, there's pretty decent upside there in a lot of those fixtures. So yeah, bagging one of those top point scorers, the 10 pluses, there's enough out there that you can get 2 or 3 of them in one game if it's the chaos games that we were talking about. So yeah, have a bit of a roll of the dice, pick a low owned differential, which we'll talk about in a little bit of time, in one of those chaos games, and you might find yourself with a bit of good fortune.
Yeah, exactly. I do think it's worth saying that, yeah, okay, I think that there will be a goal. There's historically a lot of goals, and in terms of that, there's probably net more FPL points scored than you otherwise expect. Like the average is going to be pretty high. And the only thing is that I think that shouldn't translate into overestimating what you can possibly do on the final day. So I'm going to find myself, I don't know, probably about kind of 33 points off the top 100k after today. I mean, that's game over. There's no way in hell you can do it. Last year, for context, I was 128k going into the final day, and that was doable. That's a doable swing. I think I was kind of like, I think I need like a 10-15 point swing to do it. I think that's within the scope. I mean, you're looking at something 1, 2, 3, 4 players really going wild if you're that far out. If you're right on the cusp though, 150, 140k, you might be able to, I don't know, just about get in as long as you make a canny transfer of a differential. I think you probably would be looking at captaining a bit of a chalk pick in the Saka, something like that. If you're further out like me, the only sort of thing, and we'll talk about this later on the captains as well, the only thing that I really think is going to be viable is to just go wild, really, and captain someone else and see what happens and hope for the very best. Because otherwise, you just, at this point, sadly, for most people, I think it is the case you have nothing really to play for. So you're back in the chaos zone. So why not lean into it and go wild? But yeah, I mean, achievability, Sam, on the final day, sometimes it is possible, and other times it's just a case of being like, yeah, okay, let's just enjoy it. You won't have this again for 2 or 3 months. So yeah, just make the most of the final day of the football in the Premier League.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in both of our ranks, but probably less so for you, you've got an outside hope, but I don't. I'm looking at players that I think can just offer me a good memory over the next few seasons. Like, we're looking back at these last five years, and 1 or 2 of these hauls I remember fondly because I had those players. Last year I missed out on Mateta and Eze, and a lot of people obviously benefited from those. So yeah, there's always 1 or 2 players that just put their hand up in game week 38 and give you a lasting memory, even if you've had a pretty rubbish season. So I'll be trying to capture one of those. I don't know whether knowing that I need to try and capture one of those makes any difference. I don't think the knowledge of that aim is necessarily helping me find one, but I guess in a way it's even sweeter the more differential they are. If you've got a realistic hope, and with a realistic hope, I would say if you're within 15 points at this point, there's a hope, and you just need to get a good chunk of variance, but variance all the same, and it's doable. I think getting the captaincy right and then getting one differential right probably gets you there in a lot of cases. As long as the rest of your team doesn't have an absolute shocker, you can probably do it. Anything more than 15, you're really hoping for something quite major to happen, and a lot of things to go your way where other people's favorite differentials aren't hauling, or the second most popular captaincy pick, or the other captaincy pick that you went against isn't the one hauling, then yeah, again, it's possible, but it's a bit of a stretch. At our ranks and our positions, it's probably a step too far, but that doesn't stop us from trying it anyway, going with some differentials. We'll come on to captaincy in a minute, but that in itself can be a massive edge if you wanted to use it in that way, to go against the grain and try and leapfrog a 15-20 point gap.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've had all sort of manner of experiences. Like, last year didn't really captain right. I think I had Salah, who just got an assist, I think it was. But then I had Mateta at kind of 14% EO, and then Dallo at 3% EO with a goal and clean sheet. And suddenly, everything kind of came together for me. There are loads of goals. There is a lot of kind of scope for these sort of things to happen. There's 5-0 slapping, 1-0 paddling every year. So yeah, just see what happens, really. And if you're consolidating, Sam, I guess it is the case that you're probably likely already in quite a straightforward template position, and I suspect really it's a case of going with quite the straightforward pickups and waiting for the news. That's kind of the only way I can possibly see it. And I didn't have, and I probably should have, any recollections of last day leaks or anything like that. I'm assuming that we didn't get one last year on Isaac, for example. Otherwise, I'm sure maybe you wouldn't have sold for Mateta in the end. Yeah, luck of the draw. For everybody who had Mateta and Eze last year, someone like you sadly had Elise, and that can be just the way it goes in the crapshoot that is the final day.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. And I think that's probably about all we've got to say. Join us at the Thirsty Bear to live through it all with us. Bold claims, then it's all over for this season, isn't it? I have prevailed, unless you do have some sort of multi-score final Aka style final day fun day punt that I'm going to allow you to have 2 points for. Maybe we should have thought about that beforehand, but you were on a plane and I was really busy with work. But yeah, last week we both got zeros, but we're still above 20% hit rate, which is obviously fantastic.
Yeah, you've been holding up the fort for me recently. So obviously 5-3 to you. My bold claim didn't come in. Watkins and Rodgers both to blank against Spurs, both got assists. So as a Watkins captainer, I was fairly happy with that. Could have done with a bit more, really. But again, I've been using the happiness hedge to my advantage on this recently. And although not getting the bold claims, they've generally been doing okay in my team. So I'm not too unhappy about it.
Yeah, exactly. You'll take that one. I said no clean sheets, and I probably should have done that this week actually, but never mind. Yeah, and for the week ahead, the final one. How bold is yours? I haven't actually seen it yet. Okay, I'll let you have 2 if that happens.
Oh, I think if Southampton beat Arsenal, I should get 3 points like Southampton did, and that gives me a chance of winning still.
I'll let you have it. If that happens, okay. I'll let you have it for this year.
Either that or a beer at the pub. One of the two I'll take.
I mean, if I think it's one of those. I don't know what the odds would be, but I think if you put 100 quid on that, you'd easily get £1,000, wouldn't you? If that happened.
Tom, if I'm putting 100 quid on that, I'm losing 100 quid. It ain't happening. Look, I mean, it's the last time I'm going to be able to put anything on Southampton this season, and maybe for a few years, given the position we're in at the moment. So might as well go out swinging, and Southampton to beat your club. So it was perfect. It was the perfect bold claim to end the season on. Screw it, why not?
I like it. I saw Will still being linked with you guys. He's left. His partner sadly unwell, so he's moving back to the UK. So I think that'll be an interesting one. I think he's done the right Lons this year. Lons or Rennes. I think he's been at one or both.
Lons.
And yeah, he's been very good this year. I think they finished 8th with a cut budget or something like that. So that'll be an interesting one. And I've just gone for the classic highest scoring player has less than 10% overall ownership. And I think we'll kind of obviously it won't change, but just when deadline comes, I think that will be it. So yeah, I think that would be a nice one to run off the season. And next week we'll do a wrap up of the final season long bowl claims. I think I've got one, maybe two. I think I've got one. So it might be another 1-0. I think I got 1-0 last year. I'll dig that out and see if I can figure it out. But yeah, I think it's another victory for me. Can I make it a hat trick next year? Let's see. Hey, I mean, we can take an 1 in 5 strike rate is obviously a good one. All right, captaincy debate this week then, Sam. Quite a lot going on, isn't there?
Yeah, I think going to be a bit of a split pin again this week. You seem very bullish on Saka, and you seem to think, as far as I can tell anyway, I don't want to take words out of your mouth, but you think he'll be the chalk captain for a lot, it sounds like. I'm not as confident. I don't think that he will be. I don't think he'll be as high owned or as brought in as maybe you think. And I think he will be a differential as a captain. I think anyone who buys him will captain him, but I don't think that many people are looking at buying him from what I can tell online at the moment. But we'll see. I might be wrong, and it might build up a bit more steam over the coming days, but it didn't seem to me like there was too much like noise around the community on him. Salah for me is probably where I'm going at the moment. At home to Palace, both teams are properly beach mode, party mode. Salah, I mean, look, the team around him has been very much casual and chilled out recently, but he's got records himself to go for still. Slot has said that over the coming days they're training properly, and obviously Palace after this game look like they're going to be in full party mode as well, having just played their last home game of the season. I think that there's 4 or 5 goals in it for Liverpool if they want it and they're hungry, and I think Salah could be someone that gets that like final day blowout hat trick, and I don't want to move away from him too easily. Bowen as well, great option away at Ipswich, although maybe more of a steady Eddie. It doesn't seem likely that he gets 2-3 returns a game, but if he's ever going to do it, it would be away at Ipswich, who obviously already relegated. And would you call it on the beach? It's more, I don't know, what can you be if you've already been relegated?
I don't know. On the
I don't know.
At the bar,
not on the beach. Okay,
drowning one's sorrows. Yeah, I mean, I think so much of this is so contingent on your situation, I guess. I do feel like Salah, and maybe you're right on Saka, maybe it's just me overestimating it. To some extent, it might be that it's difficult for people to release the funds to get to Saka. I don't know. But I don't know. I do feel like most people are going to be pulling it that way, especially in the kind of in terms of the influential sphere, I guess, out there. I do feel like we'll see a bit of a surge towards him towards the end of the week. I have no doubt of that. Like we saw with Watkins last week, where he went from like 10% effective ownership to over 100 within the course of 1 week. I really feel like you'll see a lot of people just kind of get into Saka no matter what.
I think that'll be Evan Nilsson this week.
Really, I don't really see. With that, I don't know what the template front three is at the moment. So I was looking at what I've got: Isaac, Visser, Watkins. As I said, I mean, it's only Isaac who can go. But if Isaac's fit, he's a captaincy option as well. And I'm not going to believe a word Hal says. So that's again going to come down to the final moment. I think I will do KDB to Saka. I might even do that tonight, just forget about it. To be honest, until the end of the week. But I simply think that this week it really is about Salah being kind of the main sort of like EO bastion of safety, and the rest, if you don't think Saka's going to be that highly captained, then become kind of the wild card calls if you're chasing a little bit. And I do like Bowen as in that sort of chaos sort of scenario, just because I do think that game really could go anywhere. Christ knows what you get from the Potter team. Christ knows what you can get from Ipswich on the final day. It could easily be 1-0 Ipswich as much as it could be 3-3. And if it is 3-3, if that does come off, we can't quantify that, we can't tangify that, then you'd be expecting Bowen as talisman to do the job. Same with Saka, I guess, against Southampton to some extent. But Bowen's got the minutes. He's also got. I don't know if he's got penalties actually. Bumo could actually again be another one on the list, just because you might be looking at Wolves and thinking, well, they've given up really. they are scoring goals. And so, I mean, there are loads of players who are currently on the table. I do think that, given the fact I may have a vague outside chance of top 100k when you're looking at kind of 40-point swing or something wild, I am probably looking at going for an ultra differential captain. Is Saka going to be that? I mean, probably. I mean, as long as I think it's more, to some extent, it's probably not about looking at rank anymore. I'm thinking about how much I'm going to enjoy the final day, because, all right, maybe you may be thinking, oh, you're going to be staring at that for the rest of the season. In reality, what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be probably closing FPL and not looking at it after the final pod until next year. And so, yeah, I think that's probably what's more likely.
Yeah, agreed on that. And I think Saka kind of ticks all the boxes for you, because he is likely to start. He's your own club. It's against one of the worst Premier League sides of all time. Not the worst, let's be fair, but one of. And obviously he's been a bit unlucky recently with the XG not really returning. But yeah, I think it ticks all the boxes for you. I think he'll be more differential than maybe you've got down on paper at the moment. And if you get lucky, Saka is a volume guy. He could get 2 or 3 returns in that match easily if he does start and get good minutes. It could be the swing you need. I mean, it's a stretch, but it's not impossible, especially if the other players that most people go for, a Salah, a Bowen, don't haul, or just stay completely quiet and don't get anything. If Saka is the one that blows up, that could be your 15, 20 point difference. And then you just need a couple of the edge pieces to go your way. And then you're most of the way there. So yeah, I think for you, Saka makes more sense. For me, it doesn't really matter who I pick, but it's whoever I can get on board with and just basically think has the highest chance of a haul. And I still kind of think that is Salah. I'll see if I get a little bit more brave towards the deadline, because there is an element of it is final day and I'm not really going anywhere, so I might as well have some fun with it.
Yeah, I think so. I think surely that should be kind of in your warehouse. But again, if you think that, as you said, if you think that that's going to be the most chance of having that haul and you're going to have the most fun, because X fun is probably going to be what's key for a lot of people who aren't on the cusp of achieving something.
Yeah.
Then I think that's fine. I'm behind that. That's fair. I don't know, man. I don't know. I think a lot of it's going to be so up in the air, and I do actually think that if we do hear that Isaac is playing, that he might be, okay. I've said earlier on with favouring chaos over control, but if Isaac is fit, he might again be in the mix. Given his kind of general fitness, I'm not sure he will be. I think I'm going to be more interested in Bowen or Saka. But I think that's all fine, really. I think a lot of it will come down to kind of the flavour when we get to the end of the week, in terms of what actually happens with the captaincy. I wouldn't be surprised, especially if you're consolidating, stick it on Salah. That's never ever a bad shout, is it? Let's face it. Right, under an hour, Sam. We're going to transfers and captains.
Wow, making good time. We must be running out of things to talk about, Tom. So onto my team at the moment. At the back, I do have double Arsenal defense. It's Raya Saliba. I do not think Saliba's going to start, because why would you risk him? But I'm keeping him there just on the outside chance that there is a bit of a miracle and he plays. But if not, then it's Munoz or Milenkovic coming off the bench. I need to decide bench order on that, because there's a very good chance that player will be playing for me. Kind of minded to go Munoz, but given what we've seen today with Palace, not that tight defensively, I think there's a good argument to say maybe just switch it to Milenkovic. Home fixture, flood the box from set pieces and hope that Milenkovic gets on the end of one, maybe. Outside of that is Gvardiol and Livramento. That's fine. Not going to mess with those two. In the midfield, Salah cap at the moment, and Burmo, Bowen, and Murphy starting at home to Everton. Up front, Isak, Wissa, Watkins. So fairly template. I think transfer-wise, I'm unlikely to use it on a defender, as we've discussed. If I was, it would be Kirkez, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'd prefer to deal with the issue of that fourth midfielder. Probably moving Sarr across to most likely one of the Bournemouth boys, Semenyo, Kluivert, or Is it Tavernier or Tavernier? I always get
Tavernier, I think.
Tavernier. We'll go Tavernier. Little bit tempted to go there because he is very low owned and no one's going to go there. So I'm a little bit feeling that one.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's kind of a why not. The other option, I've kind of gone off of Clivert because of the minutes. I'm not that confident on that. And I think if people are going Bournemouth mid, they'll likely go with him. So Semenyo, as someone who's been a troll all year round for me, but he does get high shot volume. He is capable of a haul because of that high shot volume. I just wonder if maybe I can write a little bit of an early season demon and get rid of the troll of Semenyo.
Monkey off your back.
Exactly. Like last day, kind of right those wrongs, get Semenyo in, and we go off on a high note together. We shake hands and say, you know what, you did good. That's fine. I could get on board with that. And then obviously potentially Isak's an issue, and if he is, then it's an easy move to Evan Nelson, but I'm hoping not to need that. Obviously don't want to take a hit. Would like it to just be Sar out. I only have 0.4 to play with, so it needs to be someone 6 million or under. What's Nwaneri again? Just out of interest.
4.4, I think.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if I hold off pretty late.
4.3, gee me.
I could feasibly. So there's a couple of like Uber differentials that are in the back of my mind that if we get to Sunday at about like 2:30 or whatever, just before the deadline, and we get a word in the positive sense, or maybe there's a bit shaky on Saka's minutes. I like Nwaneri. I quite like Marino. If I can still afford him, I should just about be able to do it. Or maybe Thomas Souček away at Ipswich. Again, they're terrible from set pieces. He's been a bit of a goal threat recently. And if that expected chaos factor that you talked about rears its head in that game, I quite like that as a differential. Outside option on Yankuba Minte as well, who again was a bit of a troll a la Semenyo for me earlier this season. Wonder if maybe I can right a wrong there and bring him in against Spurs, who will not care about that fixture, and maybe have a bit of fun with that one. So yeah, a few options there. I'm not going to tie myself into one of them too much. I think if I had to pick right now, probably be Tavernier, probably just.
So you can try to pronounce that. Getting all sorts of knots in the final pod season. I like it. And I do like the kind of the poetry of you starting and finishing the season with Minte.
I quite like it.
I do quite like that. I quite like that. But I also quite like the narrative of you and Semenyo riding off into the sunset together after he scores a brace against Leicester. It is that sort of game, isn't it?
I can see it.
Yeah, I mean, he shoots all the time, right? So it's not going to take very much for a couple of them to just leather in, and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, well, that's a great time. More shots, please." Lovely. Okay. Are you going to play? So I've got Milenkovic actually play on the bench. Oh, sorry, on the pitch at the moment.
Okay.
You've got Munoz first. I don't know. So I think of that game because it's the control game.
Yeah.
You'd be hoping for. 1-0 either way sort of thing, and you'd be hoping that Forest are able to kind of do one last gasp, the classic 1-0 of that will mean Chris Wood scoring, but hey, at this point, nothing matters that much.
Yeah, I think they're pretty close. I think I right now probably go with Milenkovic as that first bench over Munoz, but it's tight. And again, Liverpool aren't really that focused on defending themselves either. And Munoz is a goal threat and is a constant attacking threat in their final third. So I don't hate either of them, honestly. I think they're both playable. Maybe just favouring Milenkovic at time of recording, but yeah, it could go either way.
Oh, and Bournemouth just scored a consolation for anyone who cares.
Oh, well, I mean, Eze's scored, so that's a load of fun.
Jebison owners are loving life, Sam. All the Canadians one for my Canadians out there.
Oh, man, yeah, and that's the Gvardiol clean sheet gone, so that's great.
Oh, Canada, our home and native bloody land. No, nice work. But I mean, Gvardiol was just so irrelevant anyway. Basically, this week.
Yeah, fair.
Right. For me, what's really funny is that the team's actually pretty decent, and except at the back. But I've got no interest in defense moves as discussed, and I'd actually roll if it wasn't for it being the final day, because
Yeah,
it's not
so would I.
it's not a terrible team at all. Um, like currently on Bowen as captain for Max Chaos, Saka obviously a consideration. I have been. You've wormed your way into my brain here, Sam, about Saka and minutes. So maybe it would mean that I just stick it on Bowen and hope for the very best there. But either of them, I think both of them, maybe Isaac, if we do get word he starts, could. But I think because of what's been going on with him, I'm not as interested. And Bumo's got an outside shout as well for captain. I think he's the sort of player who pulls out a 15-pointer on the final day. Crucially over Bowen, he's got pens. Which might kind of eventually swing me towards him. A bit of an old faithful, but why not? I think overall, Sam, in terms of Salah versus captaining somebody else, it comes down to this. I will be more annoyed if I go quote unquote template and going wild was the right option, rather than if I go for a wild card pick and the template wins. It seems to have done every time this year, but I'll be more annoyed if that happens. If the template wins, I'll be like, well, fair enough. That's just been the story of the season for me. But if I do kind of secure a top 150k finish through going that way, that's fine. Whatever. I think I'll be absolutely laughing with that. To be honest, I think KDB to Saka. I'm probably going to do it live on the pod now. Right, confirmed, done. So yeah, Saka's in my team now. Probably not going to give him the armband though. I don't know. I don't know if I will. I probably will give it to Bowen, Bumo, or Saka. I'll just I'll bring a 3-sided die on Sunday, and we can throw it together, and wherever it lands, I'll do it. But yeah, my only question this week is defensively, which is really boring. So I've got Guardiola, who's obviously always going to play. I've got Milenkovic, Munoz, and Livramento, who to take out the other two slots. Probably Livramento comes in and for Everton. So it's between Milenkovic hoping for a clean sheet, lightning strike twice, maybe, and then Munoz hoping for goal involvements. Probably Milenkovic because I haven't got a Chelsea player versus I've got Salah against Munoz. So probably that's that. I don't really, that's it. The only thing that I think could probably turn my head is Isaac. If Isaac's out, then I think probably the last minute punt on Welbeck rather than Evan Nilsson could happen.
Okay.
Assuming that everyone goes Evan Nilsson, I might as well go somewhere else because it is X fun at this point, to be honest. The aim is a kind of top 150k finish, I think, at the moment. So I think that's probably going to be what I do. But yeah, overall, we've got pretty much the same team. It's going to be, the options. I'm out of options. It's all over. I'm at the Alamo with my last my last clip, and just hoping I can die sooner rather than later. But hey, there we go. All the fun of FPL. I'm looking forward to the wrap up next week.
What a lovely note to end up on. I love that. We're all the way in game week 38. And we're talking about Alamo and last bullets. Oh my, what has happened to us, Tom? But I am really looking forward to Sunday. It has been a long season, I think, for both of us, but we've enjoyed this pod throughout. This has been a highlight of my week, and really looking forward to wrapping up with a load of the listeners and all of you FPL minded folk in London as well on Sunday. It's going to be a really, really good one, and hopefully plenty of goals and plenty of differentials coming through for a lot of us. For what it's worth, Tom, I think your team looks pretty good. And I think if you bring in Saka, captain him, you've got an outside shot at glory. And that could be, especially if it's on one of your boys as well, Saka, it could be absolutely glorious. So yeah, just think of the fun there. I think it'd be great, but I'll try and convince you when we get there and I've got a beer in your hand on Sunday. But in the meantime, it's been a shorter one, but we hope you've enjoyed the show, the last one of the 24-25 season before we go into obviously the look back next week. So do tune in for that. But thank you all so much for listening. We have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL, FPL Pricey on there. Instagram, Threads, WGTA.FPL, FPL Pricey on there. And Blue Sky is WGTA. Is it .FPL on there? and FPL Pricey
No,
on
it's just
there.
it's just WGTA on Blue
Oh,
Square.
just WGTA. Sorry, it's missing. That one's missing from my show notes today. I forgot what it was off by heart, which you would think I would know by now, but I will endeavour to remember it off by heart for next year. If you did enjoy the pod, please do one or all of the following, including following us on those social channels, giving the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, or leaving a like on YouTube, or of course subscribing as well on there if you're watching along on that. And yeah, thank you all so much once again for tuning into WGTA this season. And if this is your last pod, we'll see you next season. We'll be back once again. If you want to tune in next week and enjoy our look back on the 24-25 season, we look forward to seeing you then.
Yeah, exactly. Hope you enjoyed the pod. Hope this is what you think about Game Week 38. We're back next Tuesday, as Sam said, for our season finale. As Sam said, if this is your final pod of the season, I completely understand why it would be. And thanks so much for your company this year. I don't know, we're not entirely sure when we'll be back. We will be back, but I suspect that'll be around the time when the game reopens. If not before, if we decide to do a summer special or two. Currently undecided. I'm hoping we can persuade maybe Ross to come on for a behavioural science one or something like that. Maybe couple together, something like that. But in any case, have a good week or even a good summer. Enjoy the final day. See you at the Thirsty Bear. And we'll speak to you again very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.